What is up, guys? It is Hustle and Thrive. How are you doing? Today we have a spicy podcast, but first of all, I am joined by Mr. Dose. Julian Fraser.
Oh, hello. Hello. Man, I'm caught off guard. I'm just so honored to be on this podcast with you, Shae.
Yeah, good times, good times. That was a fun intro, guys.
Oh,
Anyways,
this is Shae, by the way, Shae Perkins.
I'm Shae Perkins. Off to a great start. Anyways, what we are talking about today is willpower. I'm sure you've heard of it, and basically what we're going to talk about is maybe a good working definition of it, what it does, how it works, how it affects your life, and can you improve your willpower?
Absolutely.
So, Julian, what is your working definition of willpower? What do you think it is?
Well, first of all, I mean, just taking a little step back, it's thinking that this is called Hustle and Thrive. This is kind of like a health fitness kind of channel. Willpower is a topic that's going to come up when we're talking about how we go about thriving and hustling in our lives, especially that word hustle. It comes up a lot, whether it be professionally, personally, in different people's lives. So just want to point that out, that there's, unlike other episodes where it's like, how does this relate to fitness? Like, I feel like willpower is one that definitely
It's a pretty fit thing to do.
Pretty ground with fitness. If you disagree, or like, comment, subscribe. But working definition of fitness. I think to use a nerdy academic term, there's something that's called cognitive capacity. Like a psychological capacity, and not to be super strict with the definition, but everyone has like a certain tank, like a car tank, full of fuel, and your willpower is your ability to tap into that tank to get something done, to propel yourself forward, like the proverbial car in this example.
Right. So is that tank finite? Is it like run out of gas at some point?
Absolutely. So you can push your willpower. You can force yourself to do things that are harder to do over and over again. But eventually, that's going to burn out. That's going to run out. You're not going to have as much energy to force willpower.
Right, and you just end up giving up and having a Big Mac because there was nothing less in the tank. Nothing left in the tank.
There's nothing less in the willpower tank. And then we give in to our impulses and compulsions and all those things.
Cool. That's awesome. I really like that as a definition, because some people think that you can just rely on willpower for an unlimited amount of time, and you will just, if you're strong enough, you can get through. And I think it's more practical to think of it as a finite tank. There is a certain amount of things you can do throughout the day, and at some point you just get too tired and you just cannot make the decision. Right. You're killing it throughout the day, and in the evening you're just like, screw it, I'll have a extra scoop of ice cream tonight.
Or the first scoop of ice cream to begin with.
Or maybe the first scoop was
then it just snowballs from there.
What's the problem? Then it's a gallon.
There's a whole gallon, and Netflix and crying and
a whole gallon of ice cream. I don't think I could do that. That is rough.
You give me enough time and a good enough show on Netflix.
Enough show.
I'll get you through a gallon of ice cream. But and I think there are some conceptions, some ideas, especially in sport, that you should just be able to will yourself to do stuff.
Right.
That you should just be able to, pull up your bootstraps and figure it out, get it done, and that you should always be pushing yourself and pushing your willpower. And like you said, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think a lot of people beat themselves up because they do have that second scoop, or they do go to McDonald's on the way home from work.
Right.
I'm definitely one of the culprits of that. And then they go, I failed, I messed up, I shouldn't have done that. They feel guilty when maybe if they recognize that their willpower can run out, they know that it's not as much who they are.
Yeah, and I think with that understanding of how willpower may work on a finite source, like, you can start planning your day and planning your life so that you don't use up your willpower too fast. So if you're what comes to mind is if you're a super disorganized person and just nothing happens just like on a regular, you're just always working to figure things out, and you're always just fighting these battles that may not even need to happen, but like say, what if instead of having to clean your room, after 2 months of not doing it, you just put things away right then and there? You're not going to ever have the battle of struggling with getting the will to clean your room that is 2 months of just disgusting filth built up.
I kind of like when you said kind of choosing your battles.
Choosing your battles, yeah, that's kind of what that comes to mind.
Yeah, so every time you have to go into battle, it uses up some of your willpower.
Yeah, for sure.
I like that. That's a good way of putting it. So what are some things maybe, I mean, you mentioned disorganization, definitely. What are some other things that might chip away or inadvertently use our willpower so that when we need it, we don't have it?
So, yeah, kind of what comes to mind is just like not taking full enough responsibility of your life to realize when you're being put in a situation that is potentially just harder on you than it needs to be. I have maybe a friend right now who is working with an ex-girlfriend, and it beats him up. And the simple answer is like, stop working with her. Like, don't put yourself in that situation, and it won't happen. Like, and instead, he's just in a situation where he's always run down, he's always beat down, he's not doing anything because his willpower is completely depleted by having to work with his ex-girlfriend and all the struggle that comes with that.
Yeah.
If he would just leave the job, he all of a sudden has 80% of his willpower back, and he's maybe doing a whole bunch better. That kind of comes to mind, putting yourself in a situation that's just like unnecessary. So maybe look at those instances in your life.
Yeah, so stressful people and stressful situations, environments seem like they can kind of deplete our willpower or force us to use our willpower when we don't necessarily want to. It's a less efficient lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah.
What are some other things that are less about lifestyle and more about I don't know, just the day-to-day of life. So less so choices and more just the way that life works on us.
The way that life works on us. So what do you mean? Are you talking about like every day I brush my teeth? Is that a battle of willpower, or what are you talking about?
I don't know. There are so many little inconveniences of life that just kind of pop up that I know that I can't really control, that just force me to use willpower.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, first of all, you can't be too hard on yourself. There is going to be a time, there's going to be a day where you slip up and you're going to do something.
That's good.
Something wrong, and you just gotta accept it, and you gotta move on. Just as strong as you can, as fast as you can. But what I try to think about is I both try to do little exercises to make my willpower as strong as possible, and I also try to organize my life in a way that there's not too many willpower challenges, so that I will never really get overwhelmed. And when these little inconveniences come up, like I don't want to yell at the person or honk at the person in front of me who's driving like a crazy person.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm already at zero. I'm at 70 and I'm good, and I can just like breathe through it and I'm fine. So those are the two ends of the spectrum I kind of try to take care of, so that I'm never so overwhelmed that I just do something crazy.
Yeah. So kind of doing little things to increase your capacity, to increase the volume of your willpower.
Yeah.
And then also making sort of life more efficient so that you use less willpower. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, basically that's kind of how I try to approach it. And I'm not always successful, and of course I break, and I'm super hungry right now, so probably right after this I'm gonna go get super fat and sassy with my friends. But I'm not gonna stress about it too much. It's just how things are gonna work. But
Absolutely.
other than that, like if I just don't buy trashy food, I probably won't eat trashy food. If I just keep good food on me and I never get too hungry, I'll probably be okay.
Right.
What about you, Julian? Do you have things in your life that require willpower, or do you try to set yourself up so that it's not really too much of an issue, or what's your relationship with it?
Man, the first thing that come to my mind when you mention that is grad school.
Grad school.
Graduate school is just like one huge willpower marathon. It's just of course, it's necessary for getting certain degrees, for certain qualifications. I can't become a licensed psychologist unless I have this piece of paper that says I completed a certain curriculum. Cool, whatever. Do what I have to do. But, oh man, what gets my willpower the most is when I have to do an assignment or a paper that just feels like fluff. That there's no real reason behind, just a little bit extra work so that you can get the points necessary for us to give you a grade. And I recently had one of those papers, and it is like pulling teeth. Each like sentence, each word is like, I'm just thinking in my head, I hate this. This is terrible. I did. I went and got McDonald's the other day. I had a large fries and a sweet tea. And it was delicious.
It's delicious.
But at that point, I was so depleted by writing this paper. And we have tons of these challenges where I think they might do it on purpose, where they just give you things that don't matter, so that you can just get used to doing things that
don't matter. Man, that's a whole nother story. But
yeah. So I won't get mad at our education system, right?
That's not what we're going on about today.
We gotta play by the rules sometimes, but that is one of the most difficult things.
Well, what keeps you going? Like, why haven't you quit? Like, what about you has kept you willful enough to keep going?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, and that's just having clear goals and values. That I'm doing. I am doing it ultimately for a reason. It's not the paper itself. I don't get much value out of it, but the diploma, which is also a piece of paper, I guess. The diploma at the end of the day, I will get some value out of it. So if I have to go pedal the metal on some willpower sometimes to make that happen, then I will, because I know that that's part of my goals. That's part of my ambitions. Like it fits into who I am right now.
Cool. So I think we should reiterate that you said clearly defined goals are important for willpower. So I think if you are thinking of these little tasks as just like random annoying things, at some point you're just like, I'm not doing this.
Right.
But if it all is like funneling down to something that's really important in the future, you can kind of keep it organized, and it's not so bad. It's you see what it is. It's fluff work. It's pointless.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, well, I'm going to get a diploma, and in the end, this is going to be worth it.
For sure. And now that the paper's done, like I could care less about it. It's turned in. Like I looked at the syllabus. It's worth 10 points.
Yeah.
So even if I like got a 50% on it, like practically failed it, like it's still only like half of a letter grade. Like I could still technically get an A.
Right.
And when I factor those kind of things in, like I don't care about it anymore, right? But at the time, writing the thing was like pulling teeth.
Yeah. Do you see yourself as somebody who is more willful than others, or do you believe that people can be more willful than others? Like, what is your thoughts on that?
I think that there are definitely some individual differences when it comes to willpower. That there are probably some people that are just hardwired to have more of what we call willpower in this scenario, and for other people it's just more difficult. And that's just kind of how you're born. It's like some people can jump high, some people can run fast, some people can't. Some people have a little bit more willpower than others. I myself, I actually don't think that I'm any more than average on that willpower continuum, because there are some times where I'm doing something and I'm like, I could push through this, or I could actually just not.
Or not.
And those are humbling experiences where I'm not like, where I recognize that I'm not some unstoppable force, right? That I don't just have a completely indomitable will that I like to imagine myself having.
So what about, so something that I'm kind of thinking about and I'd like to discuss is, what about when it comes to an activity that you do like? So you did track in college, and I'm a parkour athlete now. Like we do like 80% of the time love what we do, but there's like a little bit of work here and there that's just like, oh, good Lord, this sucks. I don't want to do this. Like, does something perhaps require less willpower if you really love it?
Yeah, and I think we were talking about this a little bit too when we were kind of briefing like the subject. Is that if your identity is like rooted in something, you can keep digging into that willpower. So track and field, if you said that I had X number of reps of say 300s, which were like the worst, like 300s at 90% speed was like lactic acid shutdown. If you don't know what that means, consider yourself lucky. But every time I walked back for the next rep, dying, hurting, and when he said go, I would go, and I could keep tapping into that willpower, because at that time that was part of who I was. That was my identity, man. And even in sports in general, I've always seen myself as someone who would go through brick walls to, come hell or high water. I'd throw my throw my body into the into the fray and just get it done. And I think I had a little bit more willpower in those areas just because I saw myself as someone who would win at all costs. Who would.
That's super interesting. So like, if you tend to enjoy something, it requires less willpower. But if you also identify with it, you may just like inherently be like, I'm the guy who doesn't quit.
Right.
I'm the guy who will run the extra 300. I'm the guy who's not going to complain.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's funny. And you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk as like the hard work man. Like he identifies with it, and that dude is unstoppable.
Right. Yeah.
He owns everything.
And that's definitely the perception that he puts out there, and you hear it in ebooks and different podcasts that I've listened to. Anytime they have Gary Vaynerchuk on, he makes sure that they know that he's the most hardworking person, hardworking entrepreneur, and no one will outwork them. So if you're listening to this, give us a shout out, Gary V. Probably
Funny.
Never happening. That would be I'd lose mine. But anyway. But because his identity is rooted in I am the guy that works the hardest, he doesn't need as much willpower to actually make that happen.
Funny.
Or when he does need more willpower, he can keep tapping into those reserves because that's part of who he is. That's part of his makeup, right? That's almost a different reservoir altogether.
Cool. Is that true? Okay, maybe I don't want to speak for Gary Vaynerchuk, but when you're saying identifying with, do you mean that it's truly how they are, or if they're telling themselves that they believe it, and then all of a sudden you have this like extra boost of willpower? Like, what do you think that is?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Yeah. I have a friend back home in Texas who like he's just a monster. He never stops, and like part of me believes that like he just is that way. Like there's nothing that could ever stop this dude no matter what got in his way. But then maybe somebody else might literally just like identify with it, and they might just want to be that so bad that they literally just don't give up.
Yeah. And part of it's like identifying with it and like saying that's how you are. Like I could wake up every morning and do affirmations where I said with positive self-talk that, like I have indomitable will, and repeat that like a mantra. But I have to have some like experience going out there, flexing my willpower, and then having a positive outcome, and then going like, oh, maybe I am a person that has an indomitable will. And then after a few more times of that happening, then I can really claim that identity.
That's cool. So it looks like basically we're talking about on one end of the spectrum, you want your life to be organized enough so that you don't have to tap into it more than you need to. And on the other end, we're talking about like you want to try to strengthen it. So let's maybe go into a little more detail about the organization. What are some maybe like some big three, like a big three, like let's put a number out there.
Sure.
Things we could do that makes our life just a little bit easier so we're not, expending our willpower. Like what is something you might think is important?
I think we've had a past topic on habits and behavioral health, and having good patterns throughout your day, like healthy, positive, adaptive habits. So that's one way that our brain cuts corners, is by helping us create patterns where we link behaviors together. So if I brush my teeth and then go to the bathroom and then take a shower in that order for a long enough time, then it links them together and it saves some thought, some energy, some willpower.
Yeah, you're not willing yourself to do that. It's just I've done it for...
It's a little more automatic.
I've done it for 10 years, so it's nothing to think about anymore.
Yeah.
Cool. So could we maybe hack that system and create habits that in, however it takes to develop a habit, like farther on down the road, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a habit. I don't even think about this anymore.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that takes a lot of intentionality. And it actually is kind of an investment in willpower itself.
In a funny way that has some returns. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to kind of invest some willpower on the front end to kind of commit to that behavior change. But you can definitely tailor fashion behaviors in such a way that over time they do become patterns, and they kind of fade into your subconscious. You don't have to think about them anymore, and you don't have to expend willpower.
Yeah. So habitually we can set up some stuff, and I think that's super interesting. I'm actually reading an awesome book on it called The Power of Habit. I'm having so much fun. Yeah. And there's a cool piece on willpower. But something else that comes to mind is things just tend to work out better when you're eating right and you're drinking enough water. You're just a little bit harder to kill when you're fed right and when you're hydrated. Yeah. And things just don't mess you up as much. I'm sure if you're, eating a lot of sugar and you're addicted to caffeine and you're super dehydrated, you're not gonna you don't feel good enough to
Right.
like maybe go to the gym. So, just across the board, always focus on diet and always focus on hydration.
Yeah.
But that I think could be something pretty simple to focus on that could really make things a little bit easier.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know if this would be in the same category or if this could be the third one. But along with eating and drinking the right things in a sustainable way, I'd say that sleep is a
Sleep,
big
yeah.
one.
Let's go ahead and say, diet and sleep are super, super important.
Because I'm thinking that just having high energy is important. When I wanted to push through this paper, trying to write it at the end of the day was the worst thing ever. It was terrible.
Or writing it on an empty stomach is
Right.
not going to happen.
But waking up the next morning and getting some coffee and a little bit of caffeine and a little bit of helpful. I won't go down that road, but a little bit of energy made it easier to push through and finish. So can we take a little bit of a side actually?
Let's go aside.
I kind of want to explain one thing that.
Yeah, let's do it.
And that is, what is willpower?
Oh.
Like, where does it come from? Where's it at? Like, what can I point to when I'm talking about willpower? So what maybe is your understanding of that?
Where it is? I mean, I know it's not my belly. Maybe it's in my head.
Yeah.
Is it up there?
It's somewhere up there. So it's definitely in the brainular region.
The brain thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those brainy bits.
Right. So there's kind of a biological basis for willpower.
Okay, cool.
And the best way I can explain it in a very short way, and then we can get back on the train there, is that your frontal lobe, the part that you headbutt things with, well, no, it's behind that, is one of the newer parts of the brain and is in charge of like executive functioning, decision making, complex thought, communication. Like there's a whole bunch of things going on in the frontal lobe, and one of them is just generally speaking willpower, the ability to do the harder thing when the harder thing is less convenient. So I can take the more convenient route, or I can take the harder route, but the more correct, accurate, valid route.
Okay. Cool.
But the frontal lobe, compared to other parts of the brain, is less efficient. Requires more energy, more glucose, requires more circulation. So, I mean, the brain as a whole is incredibly efficient. The frontal lobe is just slightly less efficient than other parts, right? So for a supercomputer, it's stupid efficient, but compared to other parts of the brain that have been more well established evolutionarily, the frontal lobe uses a little bit more energy, which means that as we use energy throughout the day, having to flex our frontal lobe over and over again, it slowly depletes and tires out the frontal lobe, and that's why, like, when you start feeling your willpower fade, you want to reach for a sugary snack because your frontal lobe is literally like, dude, I need some more glucose to get this job done.
Wow, that's like, I never like thought about that. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it just so happens that you're also introducing the sugary snack to the rest of your body as well.
Yeah, funny.
So there's no way to inject glucose directly into your frontal lobe yet. But that's kind of the biological basis behind a lot of willpower, is that the first part of the brain to get tired and run out of energy is going to be your frontal lobe, while all of the other ones that are in charge of like surviving and impulse and emotion are still like, they're still humming along. They're a little bit more efficient.
That's super interesting. So maybe tip number 3 is don't hit your head so you don't damage your frontal lobe.
Yeah, don't damage your frontal lobe. So do the things that are necessary to keep your frontal lobe happy and healthy.
So we'll talk about in a second. We're going to talk about maybe challenging yourself in some ways that can flex the muscle and get stronger. But what about on the other side? What about doing something that is restorative, like having time to like chill and let that like willpower build back? Like, what are some things that help you get back in the zone and like, okay, I'm ready to get back to work?
Oh man. So this falls under the broad category of what, at least we in psychotherapy, I don't know if it's the same in other fields, we just call it self-care. It's just doing things that like sleep in some cases, but doing things that we enjoy, that we get a little bit of a, dopamine or serotonin kick from, our hobbies, our passions, taking some time off from the things that force us to use our will, and, doing something more creative, doing something that involves different parts of the brain that allows us to operate from an area, not necessarily of will, but of enjoyment, of engagement. I'm doing this because I want to do it. I'm taking this nice hot bath because it feels good, and I get clean in the process. But the point is that it's soothing and relaxing.
Feels great. So I'm someone, just like the way my day works out. It's just I'll go days and days without sitting down. Like I will wake up, I will go from training to work, back to training, and I will not stop until I literally lay down and go to sleep.
Sounds crazy.
And yeah, and sometimes, even though, I can argue to say that complete and total rest from training is maybe not the most effective way. Active recovery is, maybe a little better. But sometimes literally just becoming a potato and just scrolling on Instagram and just doing nothing for a couple hours feels so good.
Yeah.
And it does so much more than I would ever expect. And I always forget to do something like that.
It's just kind of vegging out. That's why sometimes I think video games get a bad rap. Like, I think video games are a great way to like turn off certain parts of your brain.
Yeah, for someone like me and you, that's so good.
Yeah, other people do it with Netflix and TV, right? I don't have to provide my own imagination, my own plot. Like, there's a screen and it's showing me right now, and all I have to do is
just press a couple buttons,
consume, or press a couple buttons.
That's a funny way to look at video games. Right? I really like that.
So there will be some times, like, I don't play video games nearly as much as I used to, but there will be some times that I have to pick up like the old like Game Boy games, especially if I'm like traveling or something, and just just zone out. And I know that playing a video game isn't gonna like help me like reach my life's ambitions or goals or anything, but in that time, it's just like a little mindful thing that I can do that's indulgent and helps me turn off parts of my brain and give that a rest without sleeping.
Yeah, I've made it a point these last couple weeks to include 1 hour of non-physical activity to my day, and I try to do 20 minutes of reading, 20 minutes of something musical, and 20 minutes of something like meditation.
Yeah.
And those aren't like an important thing to do in and of themselves, but it's 1 hour of just not parkour in my sense, and it's not coaching gymnastics, which is like the only two things I ever do. And it's been great. Like, I end up being more efficient in the long run because I'm not just running on empty all the time.
Absolutely.
So we're running a little short on time, but I did kind of sort of want to touch on what are some things we could do to flex that muscle and maybe get it a little stronger. So in the future, we've just got a little more to work with.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Absolutely. So some people can think of willpower as a muscle.
Right.
Right. In this case, we've kind of talked about the biological basis. Your frontal lobe is also among one of the most plastic parts of the brain, which means it's most amenable to change and growth. So you, throughout your entire life, can still add some brain cells to the frontal lobe to help them be more efficient. And some of the ways that you do that is through using willpower and learning.
Okay, cool. So actually, in the Power of Habit, in the willpower section, and sorry, I keep quoting the book, but it's a great book. There was a section on, they took some students, right, and they took them through a rather arbitrary course, but all it really was money management. And in and of itself is a good thing to do, but it was rather non-important towards their life. But they found the people that went through and committed to the 4 months of money management had better grades, better relationships. They were having more fun. They were sleeping better. They were eating better. They were going to the gym more. And it was thought that perhaps it was because they just flexed their willpower muscle and got a little bit tougher, and all of a sudden a lot of things start falling in place. What do you think about that?
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially for the kids, they're probably younger, so their brains are even more plastic than they are now when you're like us, when you're adults. And we have really hard crystallized brains.
Really crusty.
Crusty. And it's not as crusty as we once thought. So there's a lot of good research that has come out that neuroplasticity and adult neurogenesis, like the creation of huge big words that you don't need to know, and if you really want to know them, you can Google them. It basically just shows that our brain continues to grow through our development. So especially for kids who are learning these skills that increase their capacity, right? Imagine it must take much less willpower once you have some self-efficacy, once you know, have some mastery of a thing. That increases your capacity in a way.
Yeah. So I think it would be an interesting balance point for each person and their inherent ability to have willpower and like maybe what you have going on in your life. But I think like maybe something to leave people with is if you can find something you can just do a little bit every day
Right.
that requires enough thought to have to like, get up off your butt and go do it.
Yeah.
I think there could be big returns in the end just by committing to something long enough to get like, some confidence and like
Right.
really feel like, oh, I can get stuff done. And
Yeah.
you may focus on music, but you may start realizing that like, wow, I'm like going to the gym. I'm like, whoa, I just went to bed on time. I'm like, weird. Now I'm like talking to the opposite sex. Like, may end up working out.
But one thing that I want to add on to that as well is that idea of it's like when you go to the gym and you work out a muscle, you don't max out every single time. You might be working to close to fatigue, but I think one thing that might be important is to, like you said, you flex that willpower in little ways, but not so that you every time you are going out of your way, you are depleting your willpower.
Yeah, that's not going to help anybody.
Have something left in the tank at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that little bit of extra energy at the end helps you process and learn from those experiences and reflect, as opposed to every night I've used all my willpower, I need to veg out, and I take nothing from that experience.
Yeah. So, like I said, it'll take a nice balancing point of like,
Yeah.
where you think your willpower is throughout the day and what you kind of have going on. It'll be different for different people, but maybe we can leave you with just like challenge yourself to something regularly and see what comes of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm starting to notice some themes between willpower and some other areas that we might have talked about in the past. So if you're picking up on some of those themes as well, pushing your comfort zone in little strategic ways, in a platitude of different avenues, whether that's fear, whether that is muscle growth, conditioning, strength, or in this case, willpower. If you're picking up on that same thing that I'm picking up on, leave a comment. Let us know if there's any themes that you're noticing.
Funny. I wonder if they'll ever be able to tell like what podcast we've recorded in the same day, or like in relation where they are. It'd be kind of funny if they're starting like, "Ooh, you guys just did that podcast. I can tell by what Julian said about this."
Do you think, or maybe we're just so congruent that the things that we talk about, like we're just so tight in understanding of all these things that like they just naturally overlap.
Maybe that's what it means. We're just the best podcasters ever.
Maybe we're just geniuses.
Or genius. I don't know.
Okay, well, that's not for me to decide. That is for the listeners to decide. And considering there's like 6 of you right now, it's a very small consensus. But
Yeah.
So anyway, I just about have used up all my willpower for this episode. How about you?
I'm feeling pretty sassy. I could probably take a break and get some food.
Get some food. All right. Well, we have been
Hustle and thrive.
and we will see you next time.
Later, guys.
See you, tribe.